So Eric, you and I met when I think I put an ad in the newspaper looking for help for working with computers because I didn't want to have to fly all the way to Singapore to make reports, which is how we used to do it manually with graphic artists. Talk a little bit about how you found me and what our origin story was.
Yep, sure. So, I remember finding out about that you were looking for someone to do basic Mac draw work, just basically hand drawing charts. And so I turned up and, you were a young consultant brought in to restructure the banking industry in New Zealand. And I knew a bit about computers. So I sat down in the office and was just hand drawing charts for a while. And then one day you noticed that I had a bicycle pump sticking out of my bag. And so you said, oh, yeah, look, you ride a bike? Oh, let's go for a bike ride on the weekend. And that was quite a trip. You just about killed me on that ride. I got seriously hypothermic and ended up lying in a ditch. But we had an amazing adventure. And as a result, we ended up firm friends and did lots of adventures together. But then also went into business. Probably about 5 or 6 years later, you got involved with with Office Express.
Right. I think we first learned about the courier industry when we were working with the banks. And you built a model that let us build a graphical representation of every single check that got moved to be processed and sealing all within the day. So there was no float in the economy. And it was like a visual model. Is that not correct? I think you went a little bit beyond doing graphic design and we're actually starting to build the models for.
That's right. Yeah. It was back in the days when you could do amazing things with Excel and basically the macro language in Excel. We built a model of the times when all the different bank branches would have to close around New Zealand so that the couriers could go around and pick up all the checks and get into the check processing centers on time. So there's a cutoff time. We had to kind of work backwards from that. And we went through all these tiny little towns all over New Zealand, like figuring out when they would have to shut down to close off their window for the same day check processing. It was quite a process.
And there was sometime later that I was looking for a bike. This is after I'd been back to the US for a while and I came out and there was going to be a ride around Lake Tahoe and I borrowed a bike from a bike messenger company. And when I was there, I saw that instead of them telling the messengers what to do, they just called them out at an auction and the messengers would just call for the job. This is all done with little paper chits, et cetera, whatnot. And we had a conversation about what it would be like if instead of doing this with paper, you could do it electronically and run auctions, but not have any paper.
The typical way people would do organized courier deliveries would be some sort of central oracle sitting there going, well, we think you should do this. We think you should do this. But the people on the road know way better what's happening. Like, oh, I've just got a flat tire or there's bad traffic over here or whatever. Or, hey, look, I could do this job even though it wasn't allocated to me. So rather than allocating the jobs to the messengers, what we did was we called them out. The real secret, amazing thing about Office Express was what we call free call. A dispatcher would receive a job and would just call it out over the radio to all the couriers, and the couriers would decide among themselves which one would do it. And quite often that wouldn't be one courier who'd do it. One courier might pick it up and then have a bunch of parcels on board, and maybe half of them go to the south end of the city and half go to the north. They'd meet up with another courier who also has a bunch of parcels going south and north, and they'd organize among themselves to hand off to the deliveries. It wasn't sort of like a top-down bureaucratic model of this is how delivery should be done. It was the couriers themselves deciding that how to do things, and they were way more efficient than anything that was happening in the US at the time.
At the time, the courier systems were there. They'd have a computer, but you type it in and then it would print out a piece of paper. You'd move that around and write the details of what happened and then type that back in at the end of the day. But we were going to do a completely paperless system. Of course, when it crashed, we would be out of business. I think we were almost out of business a couple of times, right?
Yeah. It was quite a process building that thing. It took. I mean, I think we were working on it for something like 14 years in total. But we did sort of build what was probably one of the world's best or most advanced online dispatch systems to support this free call model. And it was all done online, and it had all sorts of tools built in it to sort of solve problems and basically make sure and do all the billing and everything, of course. But really it was about just supporting this free call model and allowing the couriers to be really efficient. And it was actually a respectable job for them. Like, they could make a reasonable amount of money just by picking up and dropping off parcels.
I think some of the things that we achieved along the way was when we first came, the most jobs that a dispatcher could ever do in a day was 350. And we eventually tripled that productivity. So a dispatcher could do 1,000 without melting down. And couriers, the most tickets or the most segments they'd done in a day had been 50, and we doubled that. And so this helped couriers move from being like at the lowest rung of the economic ladder into the middle class. And it also made everybody who was working in the back office more productive. The service was better for end users, for the customers. And so we had better pay for the workers. We had better service for the customers. The companies using this grew about twice as fast. And so we started in Wellington, but this eventually spread across the world, across the Pacific to the United States, and then across the Atlantic to the UK.
Yeah, I remember being probably one of the first sort of remote workers, because we started in Wellington, New Zealand, and then like simultaneously we basically sold our system to a courier company in Auckland and in Christchurch. So we suddenly had 3 different places we had to be. So I couldn't be everywhere at once, and suddenly it didn't matter where I was because we had to learn how to work remotely, and it was quite a process, but we managed it. And then of course that was sort of our model that we then took off to the US, and that was it got big in the States.
And we didn't have a central server. Every single computer that ran the software could basically, I think we called it capture the flag, that if the other ones crashed, they could keep going. And because we couldn't afford in the courier business to ever be crashed. So you could have individual machines crash, but you could pass the flag on and someone else could keep going.
Exactly. We had a lot of quite innovative technology we built up with this idea that if everything would be kept, would be logged, would be sent on, and then there'll be like a verification that it got on to the next next stage. If one machine died, we could all the information is still recorded, and we could just start it up on a different machine, and it was quite robust for able to deal with problems as they occurred. We did have some disasters, of course, but we got around those.
We did. But we weren't a venture capital funded business. We just bootstrapped this whole thing with the money we made from the couriers. We did this really on the cheap. And, it started with one company, Office Express, but I think by the end we bought 62 companies around the world, and we're like the largest dispatch organization in New York and London and in many other cities. And so quite an example of starting small and becoming global. We started out all with radios, but we ended up using, connecting the computers to pagers and essentially text messaging. That was a bit of a battle, right? We had to learn how to interface.
Every message that went out was recorded to a text file. So if it got lost, we could go and look at the file and see what was happening. It was leading edge at the time, and all of it was done on as you say, it was very much done on the sheet. We didn't have any corporate offices or anything like that. I remember one of our offices was like above a nightclub, and so we were living there and working in this sort of like almost derelict space above Midnight Espresso, and like it was there'd be constant music playing and stuff. It was just it was very, very down market sort of work, but we just did it off the seat of our pants, and we built this thing and it worked.
So it's interesting. People associate me and us with sort of Silicon Valley, but it didn't start in Silicon Valley. It started in Wellington. It spread and went through Silicon Valley, but ironically, the technology we worked on, one of the kids that we worked with was a guy named Jack Dorsey. And from that, we learned a lot about text messaging. What you want to just comment as what happened when Jack took what we were doing and basically made it a more general solution? What did that become?
We had some sort of like an admin interface that we built in our system. And I remember asking you about like what sort of security you put. Oh, don't worry about this. Put this hardwire password into it. So I did. And of course, Jack bypassed it. He found out what the password was and hacked into it and said, your security sucks. And you got, oh yeah, basically. And so you got him involved with making our back end a bit more secure. And I remember like, it would have been about 2000 that I had lunch, I think it was in a little seedy cafe in San Francisco. And he was sitting there and he grabbed like a napkin and started drawing these things talking about status updates. And so his vision for how people could sort of like share with other people what they were doing, and it wouldn't just be people; it might be like the city's electricity supply, or stock levels in supermarkets, all sorts of things. But it was this idea of like you had a status, and you could share that status with other people. And a couple of years later, that became Twitter. We thought he was crazy, but a couple of years later, he built Twitter. So yeah.
And it did. I mean, it was a much simpler system than we built, but it worked everywhere because all it required was text messaging. This was actually launched before there were smartphones. And so these are sort of our origin stories. We also learned a lot about payments, and that was instrumental later on in starting Square. But I think, one of the things that each of us, everybody who worked with us, you had to just spend a little bit of time on the road as a bike messenger. You and I were pretty bad messengers. But we learned what it was to build systems bottom up rather than top down. So we weren't like these big tech companies that are top down. Everything that we built was bottom up, both in terms of the architecture, but also the way we worked with people.
And the other big thing about it was that we were at the coalface. We were like, having to have systems that real people used from day one. And we were like having to, oh, heck, how do we bill someone? What do we do when someone contests a bill? How do we make sure the couriers get paid? All these real world decisions had to be made. We were right at the coalface.
Very much. And nowadays we're sort of in a different sector now. We're not doing couriers anymore, but we are still working bottom up. We're trying to get everybody once again have a seat at the table. Like pretty much anybody could have been a bike courier back then and gotten paid. But now we're trying to make it such that anybody can get a bank account in the world. And it all starts again. I think just like the problem we had with when we did the courier business, we had to know which courier we were paying and which customer was paying us. And now we've got the same problem. We're doing accounts that everybody can send and receive money. And we have a whole new challenge now with who are these folks? I remember when we first did the courier business, we were basically dispatching to radios. The same radio could be had by 3 different people during the week. And whoever had that radio was who was going to get paid. But now we're trying to pay people not into their email address, not their phone number, but we have an ability now to pay people into their personhood. You want to just describe what that implies or entails?
Every person is a unique human being. And our goal is to basically be able to identify who you are and that you're not trying to sort of like sign into our system twice or pretending to be somebody else. So we're currently exploring the use of biometrics, specifically multi-factor biometrics, like taking a picture of a live image of someone's face and a live image of their hand and using that to dedupe that you have only onboarded once, and this is you, Greg, you are Greg, not someone looking like you, a bit like Greg. And then from that, you can then create identities, starting off with the Greg identity, and use that as your conduit through which you interact with other people.
And with that, it means that, we always unambiguously know who is paying and who is getting paid. And that was the same problem we had back in the courier industry. It means that once we know that, anybody and everybody in the world gets a seat at the table, both for sending and receiving money. And so it's just like anybody could have been a bike courier, but in practical terms, that was always limited to a physical reality. But now that we live in the global world of the internet, if we can have everybody have an identity in the system, everybody can pay and get paid. And because we're doing it on top of banking systems, we can do that with compliance and consumer protection both. Whereas kind of the crypto world is the world of Mad Max. And so in some ways, I feel like we're solving problems kind of the way we did all the way back in New Zealand when we were working with bike messengers. We're doing the same thing which is basically giving everybody a seat at the table. What could go wrong, Eric?
What can go wrong? Just like every time. No, the traditional banking industry is so risk averse. They're kind of like their focus is making money, obviously, but to do that, they kind of like they focus on the really the safe users. They kind of there's a huge realm of people both in the US but also worldwide who cannot get a bank account for one reason or another. They don't have the right identification. They've got a job that's a bit, their income is it fluctuates. There's all sorts of situations where people are kind of like on the outside of, beyond the scope of what a bank likes to service. And so usually a lot of banks just say, no, we don't want to, we're not going to let you have an account. Whereas our goal is to allow everybody to have an account. Even if that, your limit may be $20 because you are, Osama bin Laden, you're like someone we don't trust. We know not to trust you, but at least we know you. And so we allow everybody into our system. That universality is so important.
Some people worry that that's like a George Orwell kind of world where, like in China, they know everything you do. And if you do anything out of line, you're in trouble. And the alternative is Mad Max, where there's like no identity. You can just do whatever you can get away with. But we're working on something that's in between. You want to wax eloquent a little bit about that and what we've done and what we've got to do?
Yeah, 10 years ago, May 2016, we all flew out to Ljubljana in Slovenia. There were people there who are sort of the world leaders in cryptography. So it's very, very specific underlying technology around being able to prove that, you are the owner of something, or you have some information. And we talked to the people there and came up with this idea of a digital identity system, a system where you could have your digital identity and have your phone be a token of your identity, set up things about yourself, declare things about yourself, and be able to prove that it was you who did it and not somebody else trying to be you. Perhaps you are a graduate of Brown University. Well, I could claim to be a graduate of Brown University. That's fine. I could find a certificate, a graduation certificate and mock one up and pretend to be one. That's very easy to fake. But if Brown University have a credential that says Greg Kidd, is a graduate of Brown University, and you can then take that credential, you hold it yourself, and you can then share it with other people, and they can verify that it was issued by Brown University. So you're not like me pretending to be a graduate. You are a graduate of Brown University because Brown University have issued that credential. So this notion of credentials is really important because it allows you to basically have a bundle of sticks that you carry around that you can use to prove things about yourself. That it's not top down. It's not like some government agency is issuing this information or claiming it. It's actually it's very much peer to peer, and you are in control of your bundle of sticks. It's not like it's in a central database that someone could go along and break into that database and get all the information for everybody everywhere, which is of course a major concern with these centralized systems. And you can choose what information you reveal to other people. So you're very much remaining in control of your identity and what information you put out there to other people.
So yes, it's a very different system. We're not relying on a government or a corporation or an institution. They might issue credentials, but they're not the holders of those credentials. We actually make it so you can hold your own credentials. And I think they live on your phone, but I think really the master copy, we put it on what do we call it? An encrypted cloud, or what's the expression for it?
Well, we have a thing called Vaulty that we've built. That is a secure data storage system where the information is stored in the cloud, but it's not accessible by if I break into Vaulty, I can't see any data except my own data because I'm the only one who's able to get access to my data. So you might lose your phone. It's one of those things that we've always talk about is like what happens when someone loses their phone. They use biometrics to prove that you are the owner of this data, and then you can re-download it to a new phone. So you still can get access to it, but it is only accessible and usable on your device.
And in the old world, the way we would share our identity so someone else could do something on our behalf was we would share passwords. But in this system, we have this new concept called delegated authority. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So everybody has the abilities to do things with their own identity. Like you can send a message, or you can send money, or you could change your profile picture, or vouch for somebody or whatever. And so there's a whole bunch of things that you can do. And then you have you as the owner of the identity, you have permission to do it. But you can delegate that permission to other people. So you can say that, I'm going to allow my PA to answer messages on my behalf. And it's a very, very specific that you are only granting that permission to that one other person. And it may, and you can set up a context that it can only be that you can only send messages to certain other people. You can't send messages to everybody. Very, very specific, very controlled, but it means that it allows people to work together to do things like messaging is an obvious example, but sending money or any other proving things about yourself, all sorts of things that you can do. You can delegate authority to do it to other people.
Wow. And so in this world, it's like an Easter egg hunt. You collect all these credentials and you present them to whoever to get permission to do something. Is that Is that a good characterization?
It is, yeah. And I mean, a lot of this is around trust. Trust is such an important part of online interaction. And of course, when you're dealing with something like, I don't know, Craigslist, for example, trust tends to be pretty low. Like it's just like, oh, someone's, then you can claim something, but, is that true or not? You can pretend to be somebody else. So this idea of like the credentials, like for example, you might have a credential that says that you're, like I said, a graduate of a university, or you have a license to do something, you have a driver's license, you are a resident of a particular city or state, that all that information about you, you can share that. And that's really important when, for example, you're looking for someone to take on a job. I want someone to go and fix my fence. Do I just accept anybody, or do I, the credentials can be used to prove things about, I'm a licensed builder, so I'm allowed to repair a fence, that kind of thing. These credentials are a real building block to building trust.
And I think these credentials are portable. They're not trapped in one application. So you could take a credential that shows you are a good Uber driver or Airbnb host, or you work for a particular not-for-profit. And wherever you go, you can take and present those in a way that the person who's relying on them can know that they're valid. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So it's not, they don't have to have our app to do this. It's an international standard that will allow this to be used on any system that uses that standard.
And what about letting bad actors into the system? Are bad actors going to be able to get in?
Oh, heck yeah. That's the whole idea, isn't it? We don't want it. We want to allow everybody in, because otherwise you don't know if someone's not in our system, then they can do anything. It's interesting that there's so much focus on KYC, the KYC process. We want to vet people when they on board. We want to make sure that only good people get into our system, but we don't have that philosophy at all. We want to allow everybody to come into our system. Once they've onboarded, then we decide how much permission to give them based upon what we know about them. So bad actors are in our system, but we will restrict what they can do.
Okay, so you can be very well known, but known to be a bad guy, as opposed to lightly well known, but we think you're a good guy. The best is to be well known and to be a good guy, or gal.
Yeah, exactly.
It does sound like everything we're doing is going to be built on top of identity rather than on top of money or messaging. We're going to start with identity and attach those really powerful features to identity. That's as I understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Identity is the start of everything.
Well, I like to think of it as democratization. Everybody gets a seat at the table, whether you're a bike messenger, whether you're publishing on Twitter, or now whether we're issuing bank accounts to people all around the world. What's your role in all this? What role are you playing?
My title is ecosystem architect. So, initially when we started off building our Kiwi Express system back in the 1980s, I was sitting there at a computer actually writing code. So I learned a lot about writing code, but now I'm not writing code anymore. I'm basically telling other people how to write code. So I'm doing this is the high level vision, and a lot of it is actually working with you, Greg, in terms of getting concept. You come up with these ideas, and I sort of translate them into sort of things that could actually be implemented.
I'm just going to summarize. I mean, some people think that I'm kind of like come from the tech world of Silicon Valley, but the origin story on all this really started in New Zealand. We did pass through Silicon Valley along the way, and I'm kind of proud of what we did at a Silicon Valley level. But, we're just small town guys that make good. And we're taking the same architectural approach this second time around. We're building tokenized deposits that are available to people all around the world. But in a lot of ways, the way you and I are working together isn't that different from when I put that ad into place and hired you way back when. It's still a small core team. Yeah, there's lots of programmers and developers out there, but I don't really feel like the way you and I work really has changed that much since we started this 40 years ago.
That's true.
So, Eric, when we're not working, we tend to do adventures. I think that's what we call them. Sometimes they're called, what's the difference in an adventure and a death march?
Yeah. So, a death march is kind of like an adventure that gets a little bit more extreme, isn't it? I mean, like, for example, we had our Tibet trip recently where we went to, what was it, like 9 days or something, cycling around Tibet, which was amazing, but we were in a hotel every day. We were supported. There was a support bus behind us and things. So that was pretty much just an adventure. But then we've definitely had our adventures too, where things got a little bit more dicey. I think we've both saved each other's lives a few times in terms of things. I remember when I fell down a bank and broke my wrist in 10 places and you rescued me. You got the helicopter in to rescue me. And that was definitely a death march.
And where was that? That was in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, that was in New Zealand. Yeah. Yeah, that was on the Tuaroa when I fell down a bank. Yeah. And that was, that was unfortunate, but that's...
But I think we've punched the ticket on all the comments now. I think on the Southern Hemisphere, we've done the Trans-Andes, is that correct, in Chile? And then Joburg to the Sea in South Africa. And then we've done a couple. We've done the Pioneer in New Zealand and also, I think it was called the Wild Side down in Tasmania. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. In Australia. Yeah.
And as for Asia, it wasn't just that trip in Tibet. We've also done, because we've done Japan. And I believe you've done once with me and once on your own, the Mongolia. Is that correct?
Mongolia. Yeah. That's an amazing place to cycle. Yeah. So we had some real adventures there. I mean, yeah, okay, I broke my arm there once, but yeah, that's doesn't sound very good, does it? But don't do these adventures without risk. And I guess that's actually part of the actually a really good point is that we've been dealing with risk for having a startup and building these systems, and we manage risk all the time, and that's what we do in our adventures too. So we've both had a few incidents that have been where things could have gone seriously wrong, but we managed the risk and go on.
And I think we're going to keep doing that. We do this as an analogy. Also, when we're discussing system architecture, we can't really get away from each other. So we do tend to be able to work through just about any system architecture issue.
Many times when we're on an adventure and we talk system architecture.
It is. People think we're on vacation or goofing off, but we probably do more work on the trips than in the day-to-day when we're in our offices. All right. Well, I think you're getting ready for the Tour Aotearoa. We did it together 10 years ago, 3,000 kilometers. I think you did it twice in that year. Once you broke your arm on it, and the second time you did it solo and knocked it off in 19 days. Are you going to try to do that again, or are you going to take a little bit more leisurely?
Well, I am 10 years older, so I'm now planning on 22 days.
Congrats on getting another shot at the Tour Aotearoa. I hope to see you on the trail.